Okay, so with that being said, let's get started. We're going to continue Genesis 47, and I'm reading out of the New Living Translation, the NLT. Amen. Then Joseph went to see Pharaoh and told him, "My father and my brothers have arrived from the land of Canaan. They have come with all their flocks and herds and possessions, and they're now in the region of Goshen." Joseph took 5 of his brothers with him and presented them to Pharaoh. And Pharaoh asked the brothers, "What is your occupation?" They replied, "We, your servants, are shepherds, just like our ancestors. We've come to live here in Egypt for a while, for there is no pasture for our flocks in Canaan. The famine is very severe there, so please, we request permission to live in the region of Goshen." Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Now that your father and brothers have joined you here, choose any place in the entire land of Egypt for them to live. Give them the best land of Egypt. Let them live in the region of Goshen. And if any of them has special skills, put them in charge of my livestock too." Then Joseph brought in his father Jacob and presented him to Pharaoh. And Jacob blessed Pharaoh. Now, Jacob blessed Pharaoh. Let's talk about this for a second. Remember, Pharaoh was Earth's greatest king at this time. He was actually blessed by Jacob, chosen by God to lead his people. That is actually a very, very strong statement. For Jacob to bless Pharaoh, being that Pharaoh was literally Earth's greatest king, that's a very, very sobering thought. That's beautiful. Now, although Pharaoh was the more wealthy and powerful, Jacob clearly was the superior, for he blessed Pharaoh. That's the expression. Remember Melchizedek? He had blessed Abraham in Genesis 14, verse 19, showing his superiority to Abraham. For the less is blessed of the better. That's from Hebrews chapter 7, verse 7. So let's continue here. "How old are you?" Pharaoh asked him. Jacob replied, "I've traveled this earth for 130 hard years, but my life has been short compared to the lives of my ancestors." Then Jacob blessed Pharaoh again before leaving his court. So Joseph assigned the best land of Egypt, the region of Ramses, to his father and his brothers, and he settled them there, just as Pharaoh had commanded. And Joseph provided food for his father and his brothers in amounts appropriate to the number of their dependents, including the smallest children. Meanwhile, the famine became so severe that all the food was used up, and people were starving throughout the lands of Egypt and Canaan. By selling grain to the people, Joseph eventually collected all the money in Egypt and Canaan, and he put the money in Pharaoh's treasury. Now, let's pause here for a second. You're going to notice something in the next few paragraphs. We're talking here about Egypt, right? The lands of Egypt. And Canaan. Canaan is where Jacob and them came from, Israel, basically, right? You notice all the calamity that's about to happen to the Egyptians in Canaan does not apply to the Hebrew people living in Egypt. It's kind of ironic. I'll mention it as we go along. When the people of Egypt and Canaan ran out of money, all the Egyptians came to Joseph. "Our money is gone," they cried, "but please give us food, or we will pass away before your very eyes." Joseph replied, "Since your money is gone, bring me your livestock. I will give you food in exchange for your livestock." So they brought their livestock to Joseph in exchange for food. In exchange for their horses, flocks of sheep and goats, herds of cattle and donkeys, Joseph provided them with food for another year. But that year ended, and the next year they came again and said, "We cannot hide the truth from you, my lord. Our money is gone, and all our livestock and cattle are yours. We have nothing left to give but our bodies and our land. So why should we pass away before your very eyes? Buy us and our land in exchange for food. We offer our land and ourselves as slaves for Pharaoh. Just give us grain so we may live and not pass away, and so the land does not become empty and desolate." So far, right here, it seems like everybody's in dire straits, right? Everybody. But no, 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 no. Let's continue. So Joseph brought all the land of Egypt for Pharaoh. All the who? Egyptians sold him their fields because the famine was so severe, and soon all the land belonged to Pharaoh. As for the people, he made them all slaves, from one end of Egypt to the other. The only land he did not buy was the land belonging to the priests. They received an allotment of food directly from Pharaoh, so they did not need to sell their land. No mention of the Hebrew people yet, right? The Israelites. It's by design. It's by design. Then Joseph said to the people, "Look, today I have bought you and your land for Pharaoh. I will provide you with seed so you can plant the fields. Then, when you harvest it, 1/5 of your crop will belong to Pharaoh. You may keep the remaining 4/5 as seed for your fields and as food for you, your households, and your little ones." Now, we just read slaves, the term slaves. The Greek Septuagint states instead, he moved them into the towns. Maybe even your own translation says that, Possibly because it is where the storehouses were located, where they held all the grain. Slaves, the Hebrew term abadim, and towns, the Hebrew word hebarim. The Hebrew translation is very slight. Now, let's continue. "You have saved our lives," they exclaimed. "May it please you, my lord, to let us be Pharaoh's servants." Joseph then issued a decree still in effect in the land of Egypt, that Pharaoh should receive 1/5 of all the crops grown on his land. Only the land belonging to the priests was not given to Pharaoh. These were, of course, the Egyptian priests, not the Levites. There was no Levites yet. Well, there were, but there was a small group right there. But again, no mention of the Israelites yet, right? Okay. Meanwhile, the people of Israel, here we go now, the Israelites. Meanwhile, the people of Israel settled in the region of Goshen in Egypt. There they acquired property, and they were fruitful, and their population grew rapidly. Jacob lived for 17 years after his arrival in Egypt, so he lived 147 years in all. So, in other words, the Hebrews, instead of suffering, they multiplied from 70 plus, the women and the children, they eventually increased to over 2 million. How is that? Well, Numbers chapter 1, verse 46 counted over 600,000 men older than 20 years of age. Then you put into account all the women and the children, you got over 2 million people. Not yet, of course, but they will. But notice that God had grace and mercy over them. He didn't let them suffer or sell themselves. They became eventually slaves because of the following Pharaoh, who was not sympathetic to their needs, and to Joseph. But notice right here, there was no mention of Israelites. The first mention of Israelites right here, they were actually very prosperous. Let's continue a little more. As the time of his deletion drew near, Jacob called for his son Joseph and said to him, "Please do me this favor. Put your hand under my thigh and swear that you will treat me with unfailing love by honoring this last request. Do not bury me in Egypt. When I pass away, please take my body out of Egypt and bury me with my ancestors." So Joseph promised, "I will do as you ask." Now, the hand under a thigh thing that we just read was considered when making a serious oath. Whenever somebody made a promise to somebody, like an oath, that's what they did. The first time we hear that mentioned was back in chapter 24, verse 1 through 9. Let's continue. "Swear that you will do it," Jacob insisted. So Joseph gave his oath, and Jacob bowed humbly at the head of his bed. Let's go to chapter 48. One day, not long after this, word came to Joseph, "Your father is failing rapidly." So Joseph went to visit his father, and he took with him his two sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. When Joseph arrived, Jacob was told, "Your son Joseph has come to see you." So Jacob gathered his strength and sat up in his bed. Then Jacob said to Joseph, God Almighty appeared to me at Luz in the land of Canaan and blessed me. He said to me, I will make you fruitful and I will multiply your descendants. I will make you a multitude of nations, and I will give this land of Canaan to your descendants after you as an everlasting possession. Now, I'm claiming as my own sons these two boys of yours, Ephraim and Manasseh, who were born here in the land of Egypt before I arrived. They will be my sons, just as Reuben and Simeon are. But any children born to you in the future will be your own, and they will inherit land within the territories of their brothers Ephraim and Manasseh. Long ago, I was returning from Padanaram. Rachel passed away in the land of Canaan. We were still on the way, some distance from Ephrath, that is Bethlehem. So with great sorrow I buried her there, beside the road to Ephrath. Then Jacob looked over at the two boys. Are these your sons? He asked. Yes, Joseph told him. These are the sons God has given me here in Egypt. Let's see. And Jacob said, bring them closer to me so I can bless them. Jacob was half blind because of his age and could hardly see. So Joseph brought the boys close to him, and Jacob kissed and embraced them. Then Jacob said to Joseph, I never thought I would see your face again, but now God has let me see your children too. Joseph moved the boys who were at their grandfather's knees, and he bowed with his face to the ground. Then he positioned the boys in front of Jacob. With his right hand, he directed Ephraim toward Jacob's left hand, and with his left hand, he put Manasseh at Jacob's right hand. But Jacob crossed his arms as he reached out to lay his hands on the boys' heads. He put his right hand on the head of Ephraim, though he was the younger boy, and his left hand on the head of Manasseh, though he was the firstborn. Then he blessed Joseph and said, Now, before we go any further here, it is worth noting how often God bypassed the oldest son in favor of a younger one. For example, I got 4 examples so far. Number 1, when God chose Isaac instead of Ishmael. 2, when God chose Jacob instead of Esau. 3, when God chose Joseph instead of Reuben. And 4, now Ephraim instead of Manasseh. God's choices are for spiritual reasons, not chronological reasons. So let's continue. This is a blessing that Joseph gave to Ephraim and Manasseh. May God, before whom my grandfather Abraham and my father Isaac walked, the God who has been my shepherd all my life to this very day, the angel who has redeemed me from all harm, may he bless these boys. May they preserve my name and the names of Abraham and Isaac, and may their descendants multiply greatly throughout the earth. But Joseph was upset when he saw that his father placed his right hand on Ephraim's head. So Joseph lifted it to move it from Ephraim's head to Manasseh's head. No, my father, he said, this one is the firstborn. Put your right hand on his head. But his father refused. I know, my son, I know, he replied. Manasseh will also become a great people, but his younger brother will become even greater, and his descendants will become a multitude of nations. Jacob assured Joseph that Manasseh would indeed become great people, but Ephraim would become greater. Ephraim eventually became the dominant tribe in the northern kingdom after the division in the days of Jeroboam. If you recall, we read that in 1 Kings. 1 Kings chapter 12, verse 19 and verse 25. So Jacob blessed the boys that day with this blessing. The people of Israel will use your names when they give a blessing. They will say, May God make you as prosperous as Ephraim and Manasseh. In this way, Jacob put Ephraim ahead of Manasseh. Then Jacob said to Joseph, Look, I'm about to pass away, but God will be with you and will take you back to Canaan, the land of your ancestors, and beyond what I have given your brothers. I'm giving you an extra portion of the land that I took from the Amorites with my sword and bow. So let's now go to 49. Let me see something here. Okay. 49. Jacob's last words to his sons. Then Jacob called together all his sons and said, Gather around me, and I will tell you what will happen to each of you in the days to come. Come and listen, you sons of Jacob. Listen to Israel, your father. Reuben, you are my firstborn, my strength, the child of my vigorous youth. You are first in rank and first in power, but you are as unruly as a flood, and you will be first no longer, for you went to bed with my wife. You defiled my marriage couch. Now Reuben had relations with Bilhah, his father's concubine. And if you want to read further, that's in chapter 35, verse 22. That's where Reuben messed up right there. Let's go to Simeon and Levi. They mess up too. Simeon and Levi are two of a kind. Their weapons are instruments of violence. May I never join in their meetings. May I never be a party to their plans. For in their anger, they destroyed men and they crippled oxen just for sport. A curse on their anger, for it is fierce. A curse on their wrath, for it is cruel. I will scatter them among the descendants of Jacob. I will disperse them throughout Israel. You're probably wondering what's going on here. What did Simeon and Levi do that was so bad, right? Remember when they went to Shechem, and Shechem took advantage of their sister, Dinah, and he had relations with her without her consent? I don't want to say the R word. So remember how they tricked Shechem and his people? If they became circumcised, all of them, then they could marry each other, right? And obviously they didn't intend to do that. When the people were still sore from being circumcised 3 days later, they went into the town and destroyed every single male there. So that's how they messed up. They indulged in uncontrolled anger. And if you want to read about that, that's in chapter 34 of Genesis, verse 24 through 29. Now, something to note here, okay? I will scatter them among the descendants of Jacob. Remember, God will scatter Simeon and Levi. How is God going to scatter them? Well, if you read the Bible, you'll notice that Simeon, okay, was assimilated into Judah. They became part of Judah. That was in Joshua chapter 19, verse 1 and verse 9. Levi was given a more honorable position as a priestly tribe, but they had no region to call their own. They were scattered. It's just the way God works. What God says happens. Let's continue. Judah, your brothers will praise you. You will grasp your enemies by the neck. All your relatives will bow before you. Judah, my son, is a young lion that has finished eating its prey. Like a lion, he crouches and lies down. Like a lioness, who dares to rouse him? The scepter will not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from his descendants. I'm sure you know what's going to happen with Judah, right? Judah anticipates the kingship of Judah, basically signifying as a lion, the Lion of Judah, who's known as the Lion of Judah. Eventually leading to our Messiah, the Lion of Judah. And another term that I want to mention here. Let me see here. Shiloh. We're going to read about that. I want to mention that to you. Shiloh, you probably heard about that village. It was a small town eventually destroyed by the Philistines, right? So the alternate meaning, peace, shalom. Shiloh, shalom, peace, would apply as the one who brings peace. Who's that? The Messiah. The Messiah. Now, let's continue. This is actually important here. I'm going to go through a little description of each one of these people based on their name. It'll kind of give you a little bit more insight into what's going to happen. Unto the coming of the one who it belongs. Right? Who it belongs. Now, this is where I wanted to see a little star right here. Unto the coming of the one whom it belongs. Let me show you. Hold on a second. Let me bring something out. There's always things of importance here. Genesis 49. Hold on. There's a reason why I pause sometimes, because sometimes I ask myself, should I tell them this? I don't want to overwhelm you guys with information, but sometimes it is worthwhile. Okay. Okay. Let's read this right here, okay? 49:10. Until the coming of the one to whom it belongs, the one whom all nations will honor. The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor a lawgiver from between his feet, until Shiloh comes. And to him shall be the obedience of the people. Shiloh, that's the term I was telling you a little while ago. It's in some translations and not in others. It's real simple. Shiloh is another term for peace, with its shalom, basically the Prince of Peace, Jesus Christ himself. Let's continue. Zebulon now. Well, let's finish this up. He ties his foal to a grapevine, the colt of his donkey to a choice vine. He washes his clothes in wine, his robes in the blood of grapes. His eyes are darker than wine, and his teeth are whiter than milk. Zebulon. Let's talk about Zebulon real quick. Zebulon will settle by the seashore and will be a harbor for ships. His borders will extend to Sidon. Zebulon, in some translations, it says towards the seashore, but unfortunately, the King James says it wrong. It says at the sea. That's not correct. It's towards the seashore. It's not at the sea. So in this case, the King James was wrong, but it doesn't really matter. It's just semantics, right? But it would be a haven for ships. That's the main thing. But it does, if you look at all different other translations, especially the Geneva Bible, the way before King James, is towards the seashore. Okay? Toward the sea. And if you don't believe me, in case you think, he's making this up about the King James, he's knocking down the King James. Okay. Remember how the Bible explains itself? Let's go to Joshua real quick. Joshua 19:11. I'll show you what I'm talking about. In case you're wondering, you think that I'm pulling your leg. I know you're not, but I know there might be some haters out there who think that I'm deceiving you guys. I don't deceive you. I let the Bible interpret itself. Let's go to, I think it was 19:11. Yes. Yeah, here we go. Okay, now I'm going to read a couple of different translations because, again, different translations may have different meanings. This is a little more vague, but I'm going to read you out of the other one right now. Can you guys read this? Yeah, okay. The boundary of Zebulun's homeland started at Sarid. From there, it went west, going past Maralah, touching Dabesheth, and proceeding in the brook east of Jokneam. Okay, keep that. Remember, verse 11 of chapter 19, right? Okay. Let's see here. Hold on. This is interesting, you guys. Otherwise I wouldn't mention it to you guys. This has exactly the same thing that it says over here. It's just like this one and this one contradicted itself, but yet here they both have the same thing. It goes towards the land, it doesn't stay at the sea like the King James says. Here we go. It goes towards that area. The border went towards the west and to Maralah, went to Dabesheth, and extended along the brook that is east of Jokneam. So it's just little technicality. So basically, the King James contradicted itself, but it's no big deal. That's why I have different Bibles, so I can, some of them sometimes get it right. Besides, it's just a small technicality. It's not a deal breaker. It's not a blasphemy or heretical. Not at all. It just, what I'm trying to tell you is, if there's any people out there who say, "Oh, the King James is the only Bible to watch," no, don't tell me that. It contradicts its own self. But let's continue. Let's talk about the other people. Issachar. Issachar is a sturdy donkey, resting between two saddle packs. When he sees how good the countryside is and how pleasant the land, he will bend his shoulder to the load and submit himself to hard labor. Now, Issachar would be strong, but docile and lazy. He would enjoy the land, but not strive in it. If you notice the tribe of Issachar in the when the tribes are located, they really didn't do much. Now we're going to get into a little deeper in the next. It's so funny because the next few names you think that they're not that important, but you're going to see right now. Let's talk about Dan real quick. Dan will govern his people like any other tribe in Israel. Dan will be a snake beside the road, a poisonous viper along the path that bites the horse's hooves so its rider is thrown off. I trust in you for salvation, O Lord. Now, sir, since there might have been some question as to whether these sons of the concubines would actually share in the inheritance, Jacob assured the first one of them, Dan, that he would indeed judge his people as one of the tribes of Israel. But then he compared Dan to a venomous snake that would defeat a mounted soldier by striking at the heel of his horse. Now, probably the primary reference has to do with the fact that the tribe of Dan, while apparently impressive, remember it occupies the smallest area of the tribe way up north, right? And it was apparently vulnerable to attack. Nevertheless, it was always a dangerous adversary, well able to protect Israel's northern boundary against invaders. Now, on the other hand, though, the reference to the serpent may also refer symbolically to the fact that it was the Danites who introduced idolatry into the land of Israel on a regular official basis. Judges chapter 18, verse 30 and 31. And not to mention that, remember our friend Jeroboam that we read about in Kings, the guy that we kept bringing up, the most evil king in the northern kingdom? It was also in Dan that Jeroboam, who led the rebellion that culminated in the divided kingdom, set up one of his two golden calves. That's in 1 Kings chapter 12, verse 28 through 30. It may also be why Dan is not listed among the tribes in Revelation. That's another thing. Revelation chapter 7, verse 4 through 8. So there's a lot of mysteries going on here, but I'm trying to shine light on this situation as much as possible. Let's talk about Gad. And again, it's only 4 little sentences. I have stuff to show you about Gad. Gad will be attacked by marauding bands, but he will attack them when they retreat. That's all right. No, not really. Of Gad, Jacob prophesied that although invading troops might assault his home, he, whose name itself meant troop, would in turn repel them and press on the heel instead of at the last, as in King James. Again, discrepancies here. God's realm was east of the Jordan, on the edge of the kingdom of the Ammonites and other desert peoples, and thus was especially open to attack. However, the people of Gad were all able to fight. For proof of that, 1 Chronicles chapter 5, verse 18, and 1 Chronicles chapter 12, verse 8. Yeah. Let's talk about Asher. Asher will dine on rich foods and produce food fit for kings. His brother Asher was to have and enjoy rich foods and royal delicacies, right? No harm, no foul. But as it turned out, Asher's lot fell on the rich northern seacoast, north of Mount Carmel, all the way up to Tyre and Sidon. Joshua chapter 19, verse 24 to 31 explains that. However, they failed even to take possession of the Tyre-Sidon region, and the tribe soon became insignificant, possibly deteriorating because of their love of ease and proximity to the Phoenicians. Naphtali. Naphtali is a doe set free that bears beautiful fawns. What can we say about Naphtali? Oh, there's lots. Naphtali, the brother of Dan, is described as a hind let loose. That is, his descendants should be known for swiftness, as warriors fleet on foot. They would also be known as composers of eloquent speech and beautiful literature. Evidently, though, Naphtali himself was this temperate. Nothing specifically is said about him in Scripture, the best known of his descendants was Barak, who with Deborah won a mighty victory over Jabin and Sisera of the Canaanites. We read that in Judges chapter 4, verse 6 and verse 15. Now, mainly with men from his own tribe and that of Zebulun. That's in Judges chapter 4, verse 10. The prediction regarding goodly words, were no doubt fulfilled and measured by the victory song of Deborah and Barak. That's in Judges chapter 5, verse 1 through 31. It's a long, long song there. Finally, Jacob, guess we blessed Joseph. Joseph is the foal of a wild donkey, the foal of a wild donkey at a spring, one of the wild donkeys on the ridge. Archers attacked them savagely. They shot at him and harassed him, but his bow remained taut, and his arms were strengthened by the hands of the mighty one of Jacob, by the shepherd, the rock of Israel. May the God of your father help you. May the Almighty bless you with the blessings of the heavens above, and blessings of the watery depths below, and blessings of the breast and womb. May your fatherly blessings on you surpass the blessings of my ancestors, reaching to the heights of the eternal hills. May these blessings rest on the head of Joseph, who is a prince among his brothers. Now, Jacob turned to Joseph and Benjamin. To Joseph is pronounced a blessing comparable only to that of Judah, using expressive figures of speech. He compared his favorite son to a bough from a fruited vine with an abundant supply of water and with branches climbing over the wall. In this way, predicting that his tribe, actually the twofold tribe of Ephraim and Manasseh, don't forget, would be strong and numerous. He also compared him to a man beset by enemy archers who had tried to destroy him as a hated foe. But nevertheless, one whom owns bow was strong and steady, and whose hands were made strong by the strong God who has strengthened his father Jacob. This description applies directly to Joseph himself and to his triumph over the enmity of his brothers. But it also was prophetic of the experiences of Joseph's descendants. We're talking also about Ephraim and Manasseh. Now, Benjamin. Benjamin is a ravenous wolf, devouring his enemies in the morning and dividing his plunder in the evening. What can we say about Benjamin, the youngest one? Well, the final son was Benjamin, and Jacob prophesied that he would become as a ravenous wolf, devouring the prey and dividing the spoils. This seems like a strange forecast, for a son whom Jacob specially loved. It was both a promise and a warning. The tribe of Benjamin would be bold and strong, successful in warfare, but at the same time, it might become cruel and voracious. Both attributes were later evident in the tribe, as is demonstrated by the strange story in Judges chapter 20, which almost cost the Benjamites their very identity as one of the 12 tribes. Moreover, the first king of Israel was Saul, a Benjamite, don't forget that, whose character quite precisely corresponded to Jacob's prophecy. So that was a little bit of not a history lesson, but I wanted to explain some things there that might shed a little extra light on the names. Because sometimes, again, how people just skip over the names. Okay, next chapter. But there's a lot of prophecy in those names, a lot of prophecy. And that's what I wanted to clear up with you guys. Let me see my next notes here. There's some really interesting things in the next chapter. We're going to close. I want to make sure we don't skip it. Okay, yeah. I got it ready. These are the 12 tribes of Israel, and this is what their father said as he told his sons goodbye. He blessed each one with an appropriate message. Then Jacob instructed them, "Soon I will pass away and join my ancestors. Bury me with my father and grandfather in the cave in the field of Ephron the Hittite. This is a cave in the field of Machpelah, near Mamre in Canaan, that Abraham bought from Ephron the Hittite as a permanent burial site. There, Abraham and his wife Sarah are buried. There, Isaac and his wife Rebekah are buried, and there I buried Leah. It is the plot of land and the cave that my grandfather Abraham bought from the Hittites. When Jacob had finished this charge to his sons, he drew his feet into the bed, breathed his last, and joined his ancestors in the grave. Amen. So let's continue here. Last chapter. Joseph threw himself on his father and wept over him and kissed him. Then Joseph, I'm going to read this slowly. We're going to discuss this real quick here. Then Joseph told the physicians who served him to embalm his father's body. So Jacob was embalmed. The embalming process took the usual 40 days, and the Egyptians mourned his deletion for 70 days. When we talked about the number 70 before? Okay, so what does this embalming thing entail? That's what I wanted to clear up. I have a little bit of history of Egypt here. Now, it was customary in Egypt to embalm the dead, using an elaborate process of alteration and treatment of the body, which ensured that its mummified remains would be preserved almost indefinitely. Joseph had his personal physicians undertake this process with his father's body, a process which lasted 40 days. Now, it was also customary in Egypt to have approximately a 70-day period of mourning. This is in Egypt, okay? Yet the 70 applies to the Hebrews, especially for a person of national importance, as Jacob had come to be recognized. Not only because he was Joseph's father, but because he had become to be honored in his own right by the Egyptians as a true man of God during the 17 years he had lived in their country. The Egyptians themselves joined in the mourning for Jacob. And we're going to talk about mourning right now. When you get to verse 10 and 11. When the period of mourning was over, Joseph approached Pharaoh's advisors and said, "Please do me this favor and speak to Pharaoh on my behalf. Tell him that my father made me swear an oath. He said to me, 'Listen, I'm about to pass away. Take my body back to the land of Canaan and bury me in the tomb I prepared for myself. So please allow me to go and bury my father. After his burial, I will return without delay.' Pharaoh agreed to Joseph's request. 'Go and bury your father as he made you promise,' he said. So Joseph went up to bury his father. He was accompanied by all of Pharaoh's officials, all the senior members of Pharaoh's household, and all the senior officers of Egypt. Joseph also took his entire household and his brothers and their households, but they left their little children and flocks and herds in the land of Goshen. Excuse me. A great number of chariots and charioteers accompanied Joseph. This is going to be interesting here. When they arrived at the threshing floor of Atad, near the Jordan River, they held a very great and solemn memorial service, with a 7-day period of mourning for Joseph's father. The local residents, the Canaanites, watched them mourning at the threshing floor of Atad. Then they, the local resident Canaanites, okay, the Canaanites, they renamed that place, which is near the Jordan, Abel Mizraim, for they said, "This is a place of deep mourning for these Egyptians." So, real simple, but it's actually very deep, what I'm going to tell you. The caravan seems to have stopped just east of the Jordan. They kind of went roundabout, right? From the south to the east, they're about to cross the Jordan into Canaan and bury him right there. But so the caravan seems to have stopped east of the Jordan at the site known as the threshing floor of Atad. Atad presumably being a man's name. There, the whole assemblage carried out a formal 7-day period of mourning. To all appearances, it was an official Egyptian mourning from far away, an Egyptian mourning ceremony, and it was the object of much attention and discussion by the Canaanites of the area. Imagine them watching all these Egyptians coming to that area, right? The latter, in fact, gave the place the name Abel Mizraim, which means meadow of the Egyptians. As a result, they may have wondered what a great body of Egyptians were doing there, right? Instead of carrying out their funeral in Egypt. However, here's the thing. There is very strong evidence that Egypt actually controlled this region in those days. Remember the famine, the 7-year famine? Just something I wanted to bring up to you guys. Let's finish up. When they arrived at the threshing floor, oh, we read that 11. Okay, so Jacob's sons did as he had commanded them. They carried his body to the land of Canaan and buried him in the cave in the field of Machpelah. Near Mamre, this is a cave that Abraham had bought as a permanent burial site from Ephron the Hittite. After burying Jacob, Joseph returned to Egypt with his brothers and all who had accompanied him to his father's burial. But now that their father was gone, Joseph's brothers became fearful. Now Joseph will show his anger and pay us back for all the wrong we did to him, they said. So they sent this message to Joseph. Before your father passed away, he instructed us to say to you, please forgive your brothers for the great wrong they did to you, for their sin in treating you so cruelly. So we, the servants of the God of your father, beg you to forgive our sin. When Joseph received the message, he broke down and wept. Then his brothers came and threw themselves down before Joseph. Look, we are your slaves, they said. But Joseph replied, no, don't be afraid of me. Am I God that I can punish you? You intended to harm me, but God intended it all for good. He brought me to this position so I could save the lives of many people. No, don't be afraid. I will continue to take care of you and your children. So he reassured them by speaking kindly to them. So Joseph and his brothers and their families continued to live in Egypt. Joseph lived to the age of 110. He lived to see 3 generations of descendants of his son Ephraim, and he lived to see the birth of the children of Manasseh, son Machir, whom he claimed as his own. Soon I will pass away, Joseph told his brothers, but God will surely come to help you and lead you out of this land of Egypt. He will bring you back to the land he solemnly promised to give to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. Then Joseph made the sons of Israel swear an oath, and he said, when God comes to help you and lead you back, you must take my bones with you. So Joseph passed away at the age of 110. The Egyptians embalmed him, and his body was placed in a coffin in Egypt. Dun, 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 dun. We're done, people.